Hey guys, so today I'm going to go through my new Armattan Marmotte 5-inch special edition build. As you can see here, we've got the Armattan frame. This is a single piece frame. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've got the larger squared carbon here. It's really nicely cut, so I'll go into some of the parts today and we'll have a chat. So the Armattan frame comes with the top plate and all the mounting hardware. I believe it also comes with a battery strap and some other stuff like that. File in the back. We've got over here the flight controller, and so for this one I chose the Matek F722-SE. This one has built-in OSD, it has SD card, micro SD card memory storage. Comes with a 35 volt 470 microfarad capacitor, low ESR capacitor, which I'll try and sneak into the build and try and make that look nice. Let's get it out and have a look. It looks like it also comes with a plate that goes on top, so I'm planning to put a VTX on top of the stack, so this will be nice to separate those two. So let's have a look. So here is the flight controller. This one has a micro USB input, so you can plug it in and configure it on Betaflight. There's the ARM chip in the middle there. I don't have my XT60 leads yet. I'm going to make some of those up myself in the next couple of days. The flight controller needs to be mounted this way, as you see the arrow, so it's going to be side mounted with the XT60 going straight up on the side of the frame. If we flip it over, we can see here the micro SD card slot, so that's where I'll put the card in, and that'll be for some black box recordings, checking for oscillations and prop wash and all of that business. So that's going to be good. I'll move that over. Yeah. Okay, so with this build I sort of splurged and I decided to go with the iFlight 2306 Xing motors. I got these in the nice camo color, so they're sort of silver and gold. And I got the Unibell design, so it doesn't have any splits in the motors, they're one piece. It's really nice looking motors. I really also enjoy how long the cables are on these guys too, so that's big props to iFlight for that. And they come with really nice gold prop nuts as well, so I think that'll sort of attribute the build nice. That's going to look good with the colors that I've picked, hopefully. Let you guys be the judge of that. So, put that back in there. Okay, so next we'll move on to the VTX. I've chosen the Rush Tank VTX. It's a 5.8 gigahertz model. This one is compatible with the TBS Smart Audio, so I'll definitely be hooking that up for remote activation. Also with the Matek flight controller, I can toggle this guy on and off. So if it takes me a while to get to the quad once I've landed, to make sure I can turn this off so I don't burn it out, which is an awesome feature. So this guy comes with a nice SMA connector, so I'll be able to put an antenna on that. It also comes with this nice wiring which I can just plug straight in and then solder these ports to the flight controller. So we'll have a look at the ESCs now. This is my first build with individual ESCs. These are 35 amp. They come with these 4 capacitors that I'll try and fit in nice and neat. That'll be interesting. Got some wiring coming in here. Looks like good quality stuff. Get that cut to size. ESCs look like they come with some heat shrink, which I'm going to try and put around the arms of the frame and try and get them nice and close so the props can't go anywhere near it. I'll get one of these out now so we can have a look. Okay. So here's the individual ESC. I must say it's a lot smaller than I first expected. Looks like it's got some LEDs on the top here. The motor comes on this side, and then this side here will go to the flight controller. We'll flip it over. We've just got some MOSFETs on the back here and some filtering, so that'll be good. Looking forward to wiring these up, looking at the performance. So for the antenna, I've just gone with a little TRUERC Lollipop SMA connection, and I'm planning to do a fair bit of 3D printing for this build. I just haven't started that yet, so that'll come later on in the video. But this guy is just going to come out the back and potentially on a bit of an angle, so just to keep it away from the props. And this one's only quite small. Just very minimalistic antenna. So next we'll have a look at the FPV camera that I've chosen for this build. I've gone with the Foxeer Predator Mini. This is the V4 in black, because black is awesome. So we'll take the cap off, and you can see that it's a 2.5mm lens. Personally, I prefer the 2.5mm narrower field of view. I've had a 1.8 on my previous micro cameras, and it was just too wide for me. So yeah, the 2.5 should be a good option. And this camera here has two ports at the back. The first will be going to the flight controller, and the second port actually connects in to this little remote, which helps you scroll through the OSD if you don't have smart audio. But we're going to have smart audio, so probably not going to need this guy too much. Maybe just to configure the camera. Over the side. The next big thing with this build is I've actually bought a TBS Crossfire micro transmitter, long range transmitter. So I'll have to install this into my Taranis QX7. To do that, it requires a modification to a transistor, which they give you the board in this package here. But I'll have this set up on my transmitter so I can do some long range flying. I'll make a separate video on the modification to the transmitter actually, just so you guys can see how I'll do that. That should be a good one. So in here they've put in a lot of different things. So we've got, for the receiver, going to be using the TBS Nano receiver. This one is really small, so I'll hold it up so you guys can have a look. So this is the Nano XF receiver. It comes partnered with this Immortal T antenna, so that'll keep the build nice and clean, hopefully. Cool fact, the Nano receiver is actually smaller than the FreeSky XM Plus, which was previously the smallest receiver out, so this guy is tiny. So also in that we've got the transistor for the QX7 mod, and just some wiring here. And to finish up, we've got some soft mounts for the flight controller. In previous builds, I've had some troubles with oscillations, so due from vibration, so these should definitely help out. So I've gone with the HQProps. These are the 5x4.3x3. These are the V1Ss in the clear. I really like these props because they sort of go under the radar. You can focus on the colors of the drone itself, on the motors and the different wiring, where these props produce a lot of thrust, but you know, they don't take away from the aesthetics of the build. So these are cool. If you guys haven't picked up already, I've decided for this build to go 6S. This will be my first 6S build. So I went with the Tadu R-Line 1300 milliamp hour battery. This is a 120C rating. And this battery is just a lot bigger than what I'm used to, but I think it should be good. But yeah, so anyway, that's going to be the build. So just stick around if you want to watch the next process. So let's jump into it. So I've gone ahead and I've installed the flight controller and the video transmitter to the frame. So to do this, I went out and I got some 20mm M3 screws. I put them through the bottom of the frame like so. So to hold them down, I've just used 3 nuts, and in between each of the PCBs, I've used soft mount rubber little grommets. So as you can see here, we can still access the micro USB for the flight controller and the SD card as well. So that should be helpful. Also, we can access the antenna and face it backwards. So that was the goal in mind for here. So I guess the next step will be to solder on the ESCs and cut those motor wires to length. So now I'm going to prepare each individual ESC. I'm going to be using this Duratec solder wire. It's 0.7mm in diameter, and it's a 60/40 blend of leaded solder. So I've got the ESC stuck to my workbench using some double-sided tape, just so it doesn't move around. So we're going to have to heat these pads up and get some solder on them first, and then we'll apply some solder later to these wires to stick them down. Very nice. If the solder is sticking correctly, it should be shiny, just like you see there. So now the next step is to prepare these wires. So instead of buying one of those tools for $15 to $20, I just can't fathom spending that much, I like to use a little clothes peg here. And I just feed it through like so and bend the wire. And then that'll just sit like so. And tin the tip with the soldering iron. Just wipe off the excess. Tin that tip. Now I like to use tweezers because the wires can get pretty hot. So what I'll do, grab this like so. And I like to put the tip sideways to apply more heat. Okay, it's a solid connection. Move on to the positive one. Let's have a look at these connections. Yes, these are quite hot. Those pretty good. They might need some tidying up. They've just got a couple of dags hanging off them, but I'm very happy with those connections. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off the rest of them. I'm also going to add the transmission wires for telemetry. I'm going to add the signal positive and ground as well, the PWM wire to these little plates here. So here's the finished product with all of the wires soldered onto the drone side of the ESC. So I've ended up using the white wire for the PWM signal, the blue for the TX, and the additional black wire for the ground. I'll try and show you some of these solder joints, if it focuses. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came up. So I'm going to go through now and do the rest of them, and then I'll come back when they're all done. This is what the drone is looking like at the moment. We've got all 4 ESCs wired, ready to go at the moment. So I actually asked my girlfriend to braid this cable for me. I thought that looks pretty cool. So in the next shot, you'll see it all measured up, and then I'm going to start soldering to the flight controller. Pretty cool, huh? So I've gone ahead now and I've attached the ESC power and negative wires to the flight controller, as you can see here. And I'm just going to go through and do the last one now. And then in the next shot I'll hook up all of the smaller gauge wires as well to the S ports and RX ports on the Matek board. So I just want to explain the heat shrinking that I'm going to be using on this build. I'm going to actually be using 2 layers of heat shrinking. So I'll just show you roughly what I'm planning for it to look like. So I've just got these stuck down with double-sided tape just to get an idea of where they're going to go. So the first layer of heat shrink, it will be clear, and it's going to cover the ESC like so. And then a second piece will also be used to secure it to the frame. So I was thinking putting it on here like this and covering over this first piece here to secure it nice to the frame, and also being able to see the LED lights. So I'll go ahead now and I'll tin up these 2 pads here for positive and negative. So now we're going to attach these 2 wires. The first connection looks quite nice. Let's see if we can do the same with the second. Okay. So as we can see there, we have all 4 of the ESCs attached. Now I'm just going to figure out which of these wires need to go where on the flight controller, and we'll come back in a sec and I'll have those done. So this is what the first 3 ESC telemetry wires look like. So we've got the PWM wire as white, we've got the ground wire as black, and we've got the TX signal wire as blue. So I've tried to keep the braiding going around onto the pads, and I think it's working quite well. So I'll go now and I'll finish this last one here, and I might throw that on a time lapse. So that's all 4 of the ESCs attached to the flight controller now. So now to the easy part, we just have to attach the motor wires to these 3 pads up the end here, and then that part is done. Now it's time to attach the 4th motor. So I've gone ahead and I've put the first 3 on. As you can see under here, I've actually used 4 bolts for each motor. Some people prefer to use 2, but I worry, so I use 4. And to do so, I've noticed that the bolts that come with the Xing motors already have some thread locker installed. I'll show you. You might not be able to see it, but there's already some thread locker installed, but I like to go ahead and put a little bit more on. Just I feel like it helps the adhesive. So I'll go and lay this out where I'd like it, like so. Then I'll apply some thread locker to these bolts. Okay, so the next step now is to get these wires cut to the right length. So I'm going to go ahead and do the first 3, and then I'll meet you back for the 4th one. Okay, so in the last step, I put the motor wires, I attached them to the ESCs. To do so, I've been using this vernier to make sure that they're exactly 15 millimeters apart, just from the start of the motor windings to the pads on the ESC, just for consistency. So I've gone ahead and I've already pre-stripped these wires, and I'm about to tin up the pads and put them together. Great, so now as you can see, all of the heat shrink is sitting where it needs to be. I just need to now attach the XT60 lead onto the board, and I can actually test out how this is going to work. But I think my next step will be to attach the Rush Tank VTX. So I'll jump into that, I'll figure out the wiring diagram, and we'll get into it. So since the last clip, I've actually reapplied some of this heat shrink because I noticed some of it was starting to bunch up in the corners. So the next step we're going to do now is getting the wiring ready for the VTX, which is the Rush Tank model. So I've already got these wires prepared earlier, so I just added a little bit of solder to the ends of them, and I figured out which pins we're going to be using. So I'll try and show you exactly which pins. So we're going to be using VBAT for the power for the VTX, the ground wire, the VTX pad, the ground pad next to that as well, and then we're going to skip over to TX3 for smart audio. So I'll get these all soldered up now, and we'll come back afterwards. So here is the complete VTX wiring. As you can see, I've just got all 5 of the wires attached to the small ports on the flight controller there. So once the rubber mounting is back inside the video transmitter, I can install that and show you guys how it's going to look. But for the moment, what I'm actually going to do is complete the camera wiring and also the RX wiring, so the receiver wiring. And then I guess we'll put in the XT60 lead, power it on, and make sure this thing doesn't burn to the ground. So while I'm at it, I thought I would attach the wiring for the Foxeer Predator mini camera. So it just comes with this wiring loom. It has this extra wire here, which is not needed. So I'm going to actually remove this wire from the little pin header up here. And you can do that just with a flat blade knife. I'll do that now. So as you can see, I've just removed this purple colored wire from the pin header. And a good tip once you've done that is just to make sure to press down the other 3 wire tabs just to make sure that those guys are still held in there nice and tight. So I've actually already got some solder on the end of these wires, so I'm just going to tin the pads on the flight controller, and then I'll just attach those straight to the board. So the pins that we're going to be using on here is C1 for camera 1, G for ground, and 5 volt for the power. So pretty simple. Okay, so that's the camera wiring all complete now. So I've attached these 3 cables on the side here, and it's looking really nice. So once I attach the titanium plate where the camera body will live, that should be just the right length to attach it with a little bit of extra. I'm also planning to put the 470 microfarad capacitor just here and zip tie it around these plates. Final stage now will be to attach the receiver, and that will be on the backhand side there, so that's nice. So now I'm going to install the Crossfire Nano module. As you can see here, I've already got the 4 wires installed and pre-tinned as well. So what we're looking at here is the initial ground wire, 5 volt, RX signal wire, and TX signal wire. Doesn't particularly matter what color these 2 guys are, but I've just gone with the wiring diagram from the Crossfire website. So now I'm going to get the pads ready that I'm going to be attaching this to. So I'm going to be using ground, 4V5, RX2, and TX2 on top. And I'm going to be mounting the RX somewhere around here on the plate. So there we go, the RX is now attached. As you guys could probably tell, I had a lot of trouble actually getting that TX wire to stick down. It didn't want to go on there, but now that's on there all good, and I'm quite happy with it. So I've just sort of wound these together, and that's going to live somewhere just like so. But before I forget, I'm actually going to attach the Immortal T antenna and this heat shrink over top of it. That's just so when I power it up, because these guys actually, they receive through the transmitter, but they also transmit as well. So if you don't have this attached, you can actually damage it. So just going to plug this in now. There it goes. And I'll pop the heat shrink over it like so. So here's what the build's looking like in its current state. We've got everything connected and it's sort of in like a skeleton form. I just thought I'd explain a couple of things as designs have changed as I've gone along, as they always do. So at the start, I spoke about using these smaller capacitors on each individual ESC. I've done some research and it looks like I can sort of skip that step by just adding one larger capacitor just to the flight controller. So I've gone ahead and I've actually just attached two smaller gauge wires. I think they're 18 gauge wires to this low ESR capacitor. And I'm actually going to attach that at the front of the frame just before the camera module. I'm going to run that underneath the flight controller. So that's going to be the filtration system. So I'm not going to be using these capacitors, so I'll just put them to the side. Another thing as well is I actually ordered an XT60H lead, but they sent me a 14 gauge wiring connection instead of the 12 gauge. So unfortunately I'm going to have to wait maybe a couple days to a week to get the 12 gauge wiring, and then I'm just going to manually put that in myself with some heat shrink. And I'm going to have that coming up on the side of the flight controller like so, and I'm going to have that facing backwards. So when the battery's connected, the lead will just wrap around. But that's pretty much it for the build stage. I'm also going to do a bit of a screen capture of the Betaflight setup as well, and potentially even put some wiring diagrams in the description for you guys if you are interested in doing a similar build. So just keep an eye on that. And I'll come back once I've got my XT60 all built up, and then we'll install that, and hopefully we'll be able to do a bit of a test with the smoke stopper, and yeah, let's hope for no smoke. Okay guys, so it's been a couple days since I last made some progress on the drone build. Fortunately now the 12 gauge wire has come. I got it in two colors. I got red and black, and it's 200 degrees Celsius rated, and it's silicon wire, so it's nice and bendable. So what I'm going to do now is just cut it to size and get it soldered into this XT60H. I'm also going to put some heat shrink on there just to make sure it stays nice and strong. So I'm quite happy with both of those connections. This piece is really hot at the moment, but what my next plan is to do is put some heat shrink over these guys and shrink them on so they're all good to go.
Purchase your tracks today.
So there we go. There is our XT60H lead, all complete. So it's been soldered on, it's been heat shrunk, and then I've put the guard cap back over it. I think this is nearly the right length. So in the next stage, I'll actually get that measured up and I'll get that soldered up to the flight controller. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've attached the 12 gauge wire in the XT60H plug to the flight controller. I've got it actually pointing backwards as I plan to mount the battery. Something like this. And then that XT60H lead will just attach straight to that battery. Also with this build, I'm planning to 3D print a TPU GoPro Hero 7 mount to go on the front as well. So I've accommodated the battery to sit sort of more at the back of the drone to allow for that GoPro to be at the front there. But I'm quite happy with how these wires have gone on. As you can see, I've actually got the negative wire raised a little bit on the flight controller, so I've just sort of padded that up with a little more solder. And on the positive side, it sort of sits flush in. So with this, it allows me a little bit of movement between the battery wire. So the next stage will be getting the smoke stopper and plugging it all in. Okay, so since the last clip, I've actually gone ahead and I've installed the low ESR capacitor. So I've just done that at the front of the frame here with these two zip ties. And if we just pop this over here, you can see underneath, I've just wired it sneakily underneath the flight controller to both the positive and negative pads of the flight controller, so you can't really see where that's coming from, but quite happy with that. And now we're going to get into the most nerve-wracking / exciting part of the build. We're going to plug it in for the first time. So as you can see up here, I've got my smoke stopper installed. This one has, I believe it's a 10 amp fuse. I'll have to double check that. I'll put that up on the screen if that's different. But anyway, we'll just plug that in now and we'll see what happens. Okay, so great success. We seem to be all powered on. That's looking all good. I see lights on everything that should be lit up. The VTX, the receiver and the flight controller. And the ESCs did light up on the power up as well. So that's fantastic. What I'll do now is I'll go ahead and put the frame together so we can see what the whole thing's going to look like. Keep in mind, I still have some 3D printing to do. This was just a mock-up design that I was working with for the camera cage, just a bit of protection there. But there's still a fair bit of 3D printing to go. So I'll go ahead and throw a time lapse on of building the frame. And yeah, I'll come back when I'm done. So here's a look at what the final build is going to look like. I am really happy with the way this has come out. Still need to tidy up a bit of the wiring, need to put in a couple more bolts, and as you can see here, I don't actually have anywhere for my Nano RX to live, so I'm going to need to do a fair bit of 3D printing. So while I've got the parts 3D printing for the drone, I thought I'd go ahead and I'd do the QX7 inverter modification for the TBS Crossfire Mini. So I'll show you what I've done so far. You take the back of the transmitter off, and I'll try and show you here. I'll hold it up, and you can see this small little PCB board here. So I won't go ahead and explain everything. I'll just link it in the description. There's a really cool, really good YouTube video and a really interesting article online that I'll link as well of exactly how to do this. But you pretty much just have to remove one transistor on the back of this board here, and then you can just add this little PCB board here and solder that up, and it should be no worries. So I've gone ahead and tested it, and it seems to be working pretty good. So now we'll install the 3D printed parts on the drone, we'll bind up the receiver, and hopefully we can do the maiden shortly. Okay guys, so the drone's done now. Finally got all my TPU parts installed. So as you can see, I've got the GoPro Hero 7 in the front here. I have got all my ESCs heat shrunk onto the frame now. As you can see, they're just holding on like so. I've installed these pads down the bottom just to dampen the landing. The back antenna mount is actually quite interesting. This was a part that I found on Thingiverse. Credit to whoever made that. I'll put the link in the description. But yeah, it's come out perfect as well, so very happy with that. I've 3D printed a special mount for my Crossfire Nano receiver as well, which I'll put in the description. Anyone can use my 3D printed parts, so they're all public, so it's all good. But yeah, so I've already gone ahead and plugged it in and made sure that it arms correctly and everything. But what I'll do now is we'll shoot over to Betaflight and I'll just give you a brief rundown of what I've done. Because this build is actually using Betaflight 4.1. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but hopefully it flies nice and smooth. So we'll cut back to Betaflight now. Okay guys, so now we're over on Betaflight at the moment. I thought I'd show you through the setup. So the first thing I like to do is come over to the ports tab. And as you can see here, we've got UART2 for the receiver, we've got UART3 for the VTX, UART4 is the smart port, and UART6 for the ESCs. So that'll be all in the wiring diagram that I'm going to do up for you guys. So just check the description again if you want to have a look at that. Over in the configurations tab, because this is Betaflight 4.1 that we're running on this quad, I'm actually using D-Shot 300, partnered with bidirectional D-Shot. So that's pretty much in order to use the filtering, the new filtering, the RPM filtering that Betaflight has now. So because we're using an F7 board, I could use 8 kilohertz, but we're going to use 4 and 4 just to start off with the gyro update and the PID loop frequency. I just want to see how it flies with that, and then we can change it up. So as you can see here, we've got serial based receiver using Crossfire, and we've got telemetry enabled, which is nice. All of this stuff's pretty standard. So we'll go over to my PID settings. These are the PIDs that I like to run. Just sort of figured them out on my other quads, so we'll give them a try and we'll tune it from there. These are my rates here. And now here's the most important part, the filtering for the bidirectional D-Shot. So if you just have a look at these, see these sliders here, when you enable expert mode, they'll go to the end. But for me, I like to just stay nice and safe here. And also, yeah, these are pretty much just the settings that I want to start off with, and then we'll push these further to sort of, to try and eliminate prop wash and all those other nasty things we don't like. All right, so now we're going to go out for the maiden. As you can see here, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, the day after Australia Day. So let's see if this thing will get in the air, and then we'll crack some cold ones after. Well, as far as we know, I think the quad is ready for its first flight. So let's see what we can do.
Awesome. Alright guys, thanks for watching. It's been a bit of a long process, but we finally got there and it all works. So I'll get some more footage with the GoPro next time. Didn't bring it just because we weren't sure if it was going to work, so